twice a year, and or we do safety webinars, or we meet in person to talk about different areas of concern. And so tonight it is on gang awareness. So before we start, if you could go to the land acknowledgement, Brooke. The Mukilteo School District acknowledges that we gather on the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish peoples, who have lived in the Salish Sea Basin since time immemorial. We respect this place and honor the sacred spiritual connection to the land, water, and its people, past, present, and future. By acknowledging these lands and their original indigenous inhabitants, we reach back to our own indigenous roots and reflect on the impacts of colonialism and the lands from which all our people come. We are connected to our ancestors through this connection to land, for the land is what connects us all. Please join me in expressing our deepest respect and gratitude to the traditional people of this territory, the Snohomish and Tulalip tribes, for their enduring care and protection of the land in which we currently share. So we have three different interpreters with us tonight. So I'm going to remind myself to speak slowly because they're in their own rooms interpreting simultaneously. So let's go to the next slide, Brooke. So as I said, we are committed to family safety webinars or in-person events, and we chose gang awareness because there are many concerns about this topic in our community. To help prepare for this event, I have a group of parents that I meet with throughout the year, and they represent all of our schools in our school district. So we have 2 parent reps from every building, and they're called key communicators. So I met with them recently and asked them from a family standpoint what they would like to hear and learn about in this webinar. And so those questions and suggestions have been incorporated into tonight's presentation. So I don't know if we have any key communicators out there listening, but thank you for sharing that feedback. If you look at the bottom of your screen, there is a button that says Q&A. So our goal tonight is to have time to answer questions. So as you think of questions and you want to type those into the chat called Q&A, please feel free to do so, and we'll either type a response to you or we'll answer it live in our presentation. So with that, I'd like to introduce John Pullman, the Director of Business Services and Safety, and he's going to start by talking about what we're doing on this topic in our district. So John.
Well, first of all, good evening, everybody, and thank you for being here. One of the things that we can really do to make progress on any of our safety initiatives is ensuring that we have an informed awareness among students, staff, and the community and family members. Tonight, I do want to take a chance real quick to introduce Brett Stewart, who is our Manager of Safety and Security. He will be talking on a segment a little bit later after Sergeant Fletcher. And overall, I really want to touch on what are we doing high level as a district for safety and security, specifically related to talking about gangs and gang influence, but also a little bit broader. And so one thing that we've done recently is to establish a collaborative and multi-agency team that's focused on gang influence and youth conflict. This team is made up of representatives from our district, Everett Public Schools, Snohomish School District, Everett Police, Mukilteo Police, and the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office. The overall purpose is to create a space to discuss the current landscape and generate possible actionable strategies. While this isn't going to be the one solution in itself, it will ideally provide the opportunity to thought partner and authentically work together to come up with many measurable solutions. The district also reviews discipline data to inform our decisions. At both the district and school level, administrators leverage the use of available discipline data to inform discipline tracking, decision-making, and response practices related to gangs and youth conflict. An example of how the district tracks data over time periods is that a district reviews if a student has 2 or more gang-related activities on school property within 3 years, because in that case, state law allows a student to be suspended and/or expelled. Another focus of the district is related to administrative training or training for administrators. Building administrators annually receive training on discipline practices and guidance on consistent discipline across the buildings. And best practices are updated each year in accordance with district policies and state law. Administrators often also receive guidance similar to the presentation that Sergeant Fletcher will be giving in a few minutes. And they work one-on-one with law enforcement partners on gang recognition. In addition to training for administrators, the district also implements annual training for our campus security staff at our secondary schools in recognizing and responding to gang influences in the school setting. Another tool the district uses to keep students safe are safety assessments. When a student is identified as posing a possible safety risk to themselves or to others, the school can initiate a behavior intervention called a safety assessment in order to determine the level of concern and identify necessary steps of support. A safety assessment is a team who meets to discuss the student and situation and identify steps that need to be taken and supports that need to be enacted to keep all students and staff safe. As part of a comprehensive safety program for our schools, we also monitor activity connected to our school network and devices to identify and intervene on activity that poses a possible threat to any students or staff. These could be subjects that articulate or depict threats related to areas such as gun violence, substance abuse, physical safety, or gang influences and activity. Finally, as noted in several of the activities I just went over briefly, one of our most important actions is working closely with all of our law enforcement partners to ensure consistent information, actions, and outcomes. We work closely to inform our practices and decisions at the district level and ensure we align with current best practices. Now, to provide a more in-depth look at criminal street gangs, I'd like to turn it over to one of our great partners, Sergeant Fletcher from the Everett Police Department. Sergeant Fletcher is currently the supervisor of Everett Police Department's Youth Services Unit. Previously, he has been the Gang Education Officer and the supervisor of the Gang Response Unit. Sergeant Fletcher is a great resource for our district and our community, and I'd like to welcome Sergeant Fletcher.
Thank you, John. As indicated, my name is Sergeant Anthony Fletcher. I've been with the Everett Police Department since November of 2009, but I started my career, law enforcement career in Los Angeles County as a Los Angeles County Sheriff's Deputy, where I graduated the academy there in 1999. So I'm going on my 24th year. This will just be like a gangs 101, kind of an awareness of what we see in Snohomish County and South Snohomish County area. It is not so much of what to look for and make any action to, but just kind of be aware of influences that are popping up in our neighborhoods and in our communities and impacting our youth. You can switch slides for me. So when I start this, I always ask, right, what is a criminal street gang? Just asking that question, all of the 40 people that are currently in this webinar would have their own personal definition from their personal experiences, their knowledge base, what they bring to the table. In law enforcement, even though I may have a personal definition of what a gang is, there is always a definition, a legal definition. And all of these words are the legal definition of the revised Code of Washington's definition of what a criminal street gang is. Most legal terms will have a definition that is this wordy or with this amount of information in it. you switch to the next slide for me, John, and go through the next few clicks. Ultimately, this is that definition simplified. Anytime there is a group or 3 or more persons, they utilize the same name, sign, symbol, or organizational leadership, and then they're engaged in criminal activity, they're defined as a criminal street gang. If you hit that last, there you go. So I use this in simple terms so members of the community are aware that being a part of a gang is not against the law. Those first 2 points, those first 2 bullets, everyone can find themselves in, right? I use the example of my daughter. My daughter plays high school sports. When she plays volleyball, there are more than 3 people. There are at least 6 people on the court. They all have the same uniform, right? Answer to the same coach, but they are not monitored, and there's nothing illegal about that activity because they're not doing criminal activity. That is how it's viewed with gangs as well. If someone from the community called and said, hey, I believe there's gangs over there, please go do something about it, police and law enforcement cannot do anything with those first 2, right? You can be a member of a group, you can all hang out, you can all have the same name. We can only do enforcement on the criminal activity or the behavior. I want to make that clear again, that being a part of a gang is not illegal. It is the criminal activity that makes a criminal street gang illegal. You can switch for me. And you can click through. There's about 3 clicks in this. Perfect. So we'll talk about Sureños just because that's what we see a lot more of in South Snohomish County or Snohomish County area. Sureño is the Spanish word for Southerners, originated in the jail or prison system in California. And when it originated, there was an imaginary line in Bakersfield. And the way it was defined is if you were south of Bakersfield, you were seen as a Sureño. If you were north of Bakersfield, you were seen as a Norteño, right? Established around the 1960s. And with Sureños, the symbolism of using the number 13 shows their allegiance to the professional level or the highest level of that criminal organization, being the Mexican mafia. M being the 13th letter of the alphabet. That is why they use that 13. And there'll be a mix of whether it's all numeric, right? The 13 there, or a mix with the X and the 3, which is a mix of Roman numeral and numeric, or all Roman numeral with the X and the 3 lines being the 13 in Roman numerics. The hijack symbol just above in the square, that is the Mayan counting system, but that's how you would show 13. So that becomes hijack symbols that use that same definition. In our area, we do see some 18th Street gangs. 18th Street will just use 18 as a symbol, but they are more closely aligned with being Sureños. So a question that I get sometimes is, why, if we are so far north in the Pacific Northwest, almost to Canada, why do we see so many Sureños? And since we're now in 2020, it's no longer that original definition of an imaginary line in Bakersfield. It is more aligned with cultural norms. Snohomish County, Mukilteo, and Everett are along the I-5 corridor. So we have more cultural norms like a big city of LA or San Diego, right? As opposed to Norteños, or northerners in Northern California is more agricultural and rural. So their cultural norms are more aligned to that. If we do see norteños in the Pacific Northwest, they tend to be in communities like Yakima or Wenatchee, or if they do come to the west side of the mountains, it would be in communities like Granite Falls or Sultan, just because the cultures are similar to where they were developed, if that makes sense. So colors they're usually associated with are blue and black. Brown has a lot to do with pride groups, and we don't have a lot of brown pride groups, gangs in Snohomish County. So we'll see more of the blue and black depending on what actual set they're from. Next slide, please. One more, yes. So this is just, it's not a full representation of the different sets that we see throughout Snohomish County. It's just some of the more common ones. I put the name of what the criminal street gang name is, and also the acronym or the initials, or what you would see more in graffiti, right? This is just an awareness thing. So if educators or family members or parents are seeing these things doodled or written, or clothing that has these on there, that they're aware that there is a possibility that it is a gang influence and not just SSO is something else or has some other meaning, right? Next slide for me. So the overarching question that I get is, why do youth join gangs? I put this photo up there because this is what our youth are being influenced, or this is how they're being influenced now. This is a picture of a, at the time, a youth criminal street gang member. He's no longer a youth, but this is what's coming across TikTok and Snapchat and WhatsApp. This glamorization, or the I'm cool, right, aspect of gang culture. Next slide. You click this. Yes. So these are just some of the things that draw our youth that are at risk for gang involvement or being gang impacted. The one thing that I, from the left, third one down, where it says control of environment, that is not like how I grew up in the 90s. They're not necessarily trying to control a geographic area or a park. A lot of the youth that we're seeing that are at risk for being gang impacted are coming from situations where they're either being abused, or there's substance abuse or mental health, or they believe that they're a victim of something. So they are trying to control the environment in which they are operating in, right? On the top, on the right, the one I want to point out, when it says acceptance by peers, it is not necessarily the peers that the parent may know, right? Or the teacher is aware of. Our youth in this generation are currently have access to thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of peers, followers, and that is the acceptance that they may be seeking, right? When I was growing up, my mom knew that if she kept me out of trouble between 3:30 in the afternoon until 10 at night and active on the weekends, that it was quite possible, right, that I wouldn't be involved in a gang. She'd have a better chance of me not being involved in that. And the generation now of parents that are still using that model, I hear that all the time. Well, my kid can't be in a gang. I know where my kid is. I pick them up. They're at home 8 hours a day. Well, what's being missed is the influence from social media and then the youth wanted that acceptance from their peers, right? But ultimately, highlighted on the bottom, that is all it is. Impacted youth, or youth that are at risk for gang impact or gang involvement, is just the overarching human nature of wanting to belong to something. It's just that they've been influenced by that negative side of criminal street gang activity. So they are looking for something to belong to. Next slide. These are just things that when I say what to look for, it's more what to be aware of, right? So I use the top example on the left. 8 years ago, before professional athletes like Odell Beckham Jr. That now utilize the number 13, right? Before, that used to be seen in our society as an unlucky number. It is now just a normal number. So that jersey in and of itself would not be seen as something by a gang investigator as gang paraphernalia. If you can see the details of that picture, on the back of it says, "I'm a Southsider." That would be zero tolerance. That once you put that on there with the number of 13, right, that is now gang paraphernalia, and it's used to intimidate. I've had people ask me on the bottom left, the blue and white Adidas. What's wrong with that? There's absolutely nothing wrong with blue and white Adidas. The example I use is I wear a police uniform every day. If I took off my black boots and just put my black boots there, they're just black boots. But on the top, if I take my police uniform and my vest that has my badge and I put that next to my black boots, someone would be able to look at that and go, well, look, that almost looks like a police uniform. But again, if I take my uniform and patches away, it's still just black boots. So I don't want anyone to get caught up on the blue and white shoes, right? It becomes part of a uniform. Once you put on that jersey that says I'm a Southsider and it's marked with the number 13 and you're putting on those shoes, that is a choice that that person is made to put on that uniform and that persona. On the top right is an example of how youth that have enough knowledge can intimidate members in the community in which they are just by walking down the hallway. Those shoestrings right there, or shoelaces, are made to have the Roman numeral 13. So the subculture that knows exactly what that means can be intimidated just by someone having that walking in the park or in their apartment complex or in the halls of the school. Just below that, I have the conversation all the time of whether or not that item there in blue, whether that's a bandana or if it's a gang flag. I would save the time and let you know that this is a gang flag. I have bandanas in every color, and I call them bandanas because the symbolism is different for me, right? I use them when I barbecue. I blow my nose. They may fall on the ground, right? I use them to wipe my sweat. If they get old or dirty, or I set them on fire because I'm not cooking well that day, I just throw them away and I go buy 5 more at the dollar store. There's no symbolism for me. I use them what they're intended for. This, on the other hand, has been folded and creased, and there's certain things that have been said when it's been creased, and then it's worn out of a specific side or pocket or location. The symbolism makes it where it's a gang flag, right? So this is one of those items that I don't want people to get caught up on, but yes, it's still a bandana. True, material wise, it is still just a bandana, but the symbolism of it is completely different. Next slide. And you may have to click one more time for this one. So hand signs. On the left, that is a youth showing a gang investigator how he does the E for East Side Doble. That is nowhere near the E for American Sign Language, right? And a lot of our youth that are being influenced by gang activity will mimic these and try these out to make sure that they can do it on demand, much like they should be spending time doing the ABCs and their multiplication because someone has influenced them that it is worth their time to spend an effort to perfect that. On the right, that gentleman did not want to show his face, but he will gladly tell you that he's from Florencia. These are not normal ways to say hello to a group. So being aware of the communication in the subculture in your area is just an influence or indicator that there's an influence of gang activity, right? But again, I stress that it is not against the law to be in a gang. So if someone chooses to communicate back and forth like this is just something to be aware of. If the youth in your community begin to do this, it is an indicator of the influence in that area. Next. So in the bottom left, this is the same young man's hand. That is ballpoint pen. And the 13, again, they're emulating or imitating what they have seen as gang tattoos, right? That 13 is showing allegiance to the Mexican mafia, the M, the 3 dots, mi vida loca, or my crazy life. These are indicators, and talking to the kid that's on the left where it's just ballpoint pen is way easier than talking to the young man that's on the right. Across his knuckles, that is a tattoo. And someone is convinced that 15-year-old that was a good life choice, right? It's going to be a much different conversation for intervention with the youth on the right, because that's painful. He's made a decision that he's going to do that. Even if someone that's trying to intervene can make a breakthrough, if that kid decides to remove those, it's 18 months of laser removal. And when it's all said and done, it's truly not gone. They just have scars that now say East Side on their knuckles, right? So being aware of the imitating of tattoos and these symbols are where we want to intervene when it's just a matter of washing someone's hand, as opposed to having to do tattoo removal and leaving scars. Next.
So Sergeant Fletcher, I'm gonna break in here
Yes.
for a second. There's a
Mhm.
question in the question and answer, and I don't speak Spanish, but I'm wondering if Olga might have come in late, and we could put up Brooke the translator, the slide from the beginning, so she can hopefully read it and get into the room so she can understand. Sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure she's in the right spot. Okay, I'm hopeful that Olga was able to get in there. Thank you, Sergeant Fletcher.
Oh, not a problem. So ultimately, this goes back to the influence of gang culture and what our youth are dealing with, right? So we'll go, when you're looking at the screen, we'll go from image on the right, right? I go back to the parents or the concerned community members that tell me, like, there's no way my kid is involved in any kind of gang activity. They're at my house. I know where they're at. They're not out being influenced by anything. This is an example of what a typical Instagram post looks like. That is from inside their bedroom, right? And the parent is not aware because they're not aware of the influences coming through their phone or social media, right? That is now what our kids are dealing with. On the left, right, I use this as an example where I've been told, or it's been presented to me that, hey, this is just, I dress this way because this is my culture. And what I want to walk through with you is the gentleman on the left. If I've been working with him for the last 6 years, I know whether or not he's lying to me, right? Just because we've had conversations before, he trusts me. So if he's not telling me the full truth, I've worked enough where I can tell where he's lying to me. So if I ask this gentleman, he will tell me, you know what, Sergeant Fletcher, I'm not in a gang. And I will know that he's telling me the truth, right? He is telling me the literal truth because I know when he's not telling me the truth. Also, as an investigator, I know that he's not a gang member because he's not, if he's actually in the gang, he cannot do those signs and have his face covered. It's disrespectful, right? So I know 2 ways that he's telling me the truth. What I caution him and the community, right, that he is about as close to being a gang member as you can get. The rival gang is not going to ask him if he's truly in. They're not going to ask him if he's made the commitment yet. He has decided to step out in what would be the uniform of the day, throw the gang sign in front of wherever he's at, right? That is about as close to being a gang member as he is. He could be, right? And that's where I caution youth that tell me, well, I dress this way because it's part of my culture. Yes, the problem is gang culture has also hijacked some of those images, and the response that gang culture brings is sheer violence. It's not a stop and let me see if you're really involved, right? In the middle, this reiterates the fact that that is a criminal street gang member, right? He has a moniker. He no longer has to cover himself. He still has his gang flag, right? But he no longer has to to hide his identity. He is an actual gang member. But these are the type of photos that are being sent and influencing our youth. It is not like how I grew up. If I just stayed away from that part of town, or if I stayed away from that park, I may not be influenced by it. Our youth are being influenced all the time by social media. If the people that are there to provide them guidance and protect them are not aware of what they're actually doing on social media. Next. And you can click through, yeah. So this is just an example of what graffiti looks like. On the next slide, we will go through what the meaning of it is, but this is just an example, just small examples, right? DSM, Desmadrosos. All of these are Soreño sets. On the top right, this ES is Eastside. Eastside Doble or WBP, Wetback Power, are the same gang. They just have names that's synonymous. On the bottom left, the V with the arrow down is claiming that area. That's they're claiming the Vadio, but this is just one person, or one person's signature of how they do SSL, also a Soreño. Here on the bottom right, this is Vatos Locos Soreño, also a Soreño set. And here on the bottom is unique. That lets me know that either Demon did that, or Demon is claiming to be the person in charge of that specific set in this area, right? It could have one or of two meanings, but this is just an example of what graffiti looks like. We can go through the next one, John. We'll talk about what the message is. One more for me. So here on the left is what I would call a gang influence. If you take any given neighborhood, you could have a fence that's like this. And on the left, this is where we start at the lowest level, at least from the gang investigators' interpretation of a gang influence. Walking past this fence every day to and from school, anyone can be talked into doing that. That takes less than 30 seconds. So if we walk through all three images, the very first image is in the middle, the LACLS, which is Los Angeles Crazy Lunatic Sureños, was put up there. DSM or Desmadrosos comes and crosses them out and then puts their sign up, right? Again, both of those can be done in less than 30 seconds, right? It's something of opportunity. LACLS comes back, crosses out DSM, and then now is putting a V with an arrow. We're claiming this area, right? And crossing you out. This still shows me as an investigator, I have an influence issue in the community in which this fence is, right? And how I explain that is if you look at the detail, when LACLS is crossed out, or even when DSM is crossed out, both of them fall short of crossing out the 13. That is not by accident. That is a detail in which if they cross out the 13, then they're crossing out the Mexican mafia. And lets me know as an investigator, there's an influence because someone had to teach them to do that, right? On the right, we move to the next level, right? Where there's a gang issue. If you could tell from the detail of this picture, or I wish it was a little bit more to scale, this is the side of a building, right? So although they can still do it quickly, you're not doing this in less than 30 seconds. Each one of those letters are 3 feet tall. So that means if they are, if the gang is sitting there doing this, it's not being done by one person. There's one person that's doing the tagging and at least one other person that is there for protection, right? Also, they're claiming the area, and the same person that's putting up that they're from DSM is also calling out another Sureño set, telling us, or telling the investigator and telling that other gang that they're going to eliminate them on site if they see them. This lets me know as an investigator, the area has moved from an influence to an issue. That lets me know that there's going to be violence. One, if anybody confronts them while they're doing this type of graffiti, or two, if they see this other gang, there's going to be violence. So now I've moved, the area has moved from an influence to an issue. You change the slide for me, John? And if you can click it one more time. So moving from an issue to a gang problem, right? Issue being the medium tier or median tier. That an example of a gang issue is the top photo. That looks really, really bad, right? There's, if you spent the time and could kind of decipher it all out, there's 5 different Sureño sets that are all crossing each other out, letting me know that they're all in a feud, or letting investigators or letting each other know that they're all in a feud. But as an investigator, this is still just an issue problem, right? The photo on the bottom takes it to the highest level that I believe, that now there's a gang problem in the area. And although the photo on the top looks more of a nuisance. As an investigator, the one on the bottom is more of a problem in the area. What you have on the bottom is you have two completely different Sereno sets on a fence that no one else is crossing them out, and they're not crossing out each other. That lets me know, as a gang investigator, that these two have created an alliance and there's some kind of organizational leadership that has stopped them from doing what's indicated in the top photo. Okay, the difference between an influence, an issue, and then moving to a gang problem when gangs start to form alliances. Is that the last slide, John? Okay, I will take questions if there are any. But again, this was just a gang 101, trying to be aware of what we're seeing in our community.
So Brett, do you want to finish and then go to questions, or do you want me to ask Sergeant Fletcher a question now?
Yeah, let's actually pause on the questions, Fletcher, and we're going to have Brett discuss what can the community do, and then we'll take questions after that.
Thank you.
So again, my name is Brett Stewart. I'm the manager of safety and security for the school district. And what can the community do about gangs and gang issues? Community awareness and education is the first step. Being here is a good first step. Just learning what you can about gangs and the things that you can do, and learning the signs that you can look for. Tip lines. The Mukilteo School District, as well as the local law enforcement agencies, all have tip lines. If you see something, say something. Report gang activity. You can report it to the district. You can report it to local law enforcement. Communication with the district. You don't have to use a tip line. You can talk to somebody directly. Also, communication with your student, if your teen, especially teens. Make sure you know what they're doing, talk to them about the dangers of gang activity, get to know their friends, get to know their friends' parents if you can, and get the back and forth dialogue with them so you can know where they're at, and tell them the dangers of the gangs, and look at the resources. We're going to provide a slide with some resources here in a few minutes, and these will be available to you. Look at these resources, learn as much as you can, and reach out whenever you need more help. Youth activities. We need to get kids involved with, positive activities, sports, extracurriculars. If they're busy, they're not going to have time to hang out and be involved in gang. Mentoring. There's a lot of great opportunities, Boys and Girls Clubs, the YMCA, Big Brother, Big Sister, a lot of programs that are available that we can get kids involved with that'll, keep them out of the gang world. And another one that's not up here is internet activity. Sergeant Fletcher mentioned that a lot of the stuff is being done over the internet. Be aware, know what your kids are doing, monitor their activity, monitor their phones, their tablets, their computers. It's difficult. There's a lot going on, and they seem to always be one step ahead of us, but do your best to try to monitor what they're doing. Go to the next slide. Here are some of the resources that are available: the Mukilteo tip line, as well as Snohomish County, Everett Police, and Mukilteo Police. If you're not sure which jurisdiction you're in, don't worry about it. Just pick one. It's fine. They work with each other pretty closely, and they'll get you to the right place. Our harassment, intimidation, and bullying report. There are reports that kids go into gangs because they're pushed into it because of bullying. This is one way that our policy, and you can report that to us so we can get that dealt with. OSPI has a safety center where they have a lot of good resources. The National Gang Center has a ton of information for parents, for schools, for everybody on how to identify, deal with, and go with the gang activity. Gang awareness parents guide through the Everett Police Department has got some nice tips as well. And I think that's all we got on that. We will move into questions that remember we got the question, the Q&A at the bottom. And looks like all of a sudden we've got a bunch of questions. So we'll start divvying those out and answering those here in just a second.
Thanks, Brett. I am gonna read the questions and I'm just gonna hand them off to different people who I think would be the right person to answer. So I'm just gonna go from the top. So a question about the mention of no tolerance. How often are students being addressed for wearing gang affiliated outfits in school? Is there a clear protocol for this? It seems that there are many more students wearing full-on gang outfits in school, and it's not clear if there is any discipline or school policy around this. It does send a message to other students if it goes unaddressed. And normally Pat Haggerty would be here to help answer questions from the secondary, but Brett, do you want to take a shot at answering this?
Sure. Yeah, so there are policies in place. They have gang contracts. There can be discipline for doing gang activities or wearing gang attire. One of the things that's come up with our recent gang influence and youth conflict team is getting all the principals and directors together to be on the same page. So we're not one school's not going real hard one way and then somebody else is not doing anything. We're trying to get all on the same page, learn what to look for, because things have changed over time, what is considered gang attire. So we're trying to get all together and have a cohesive policy where and not just our school district, but Everett and Snohomish as well. So.
Thank you. Next question, I'm going to Sergeant Fletcher. Sorry, let me go up. What is the difference between graffiti and tagging?
So it's an argument that I usually don't get involved in. So there is what is sometimes explained as urban graffiti or graffiti art. But as law enforcement, if it's not sanctioned and done on a permit basis, then it is all criminal activity. So I don't get in the debate on what's tagging and what's gang graffiti. What I can point out are being aware of those symbols, right? The use of 13 for Sureños, the use of 14 for Norteños, right? Different things for different gangs that indicated that it's more of a gang graffiti than it is a tagging. The reasons for that are completely different. Gangs tend to be targeted in either putting a opposite group on notice that they're in the area, whereas tagging tends to be just for that person's gratification and fame, right? So there's difference, but law enforcement sees it all as criminal behavior because it's a crime to deface someone else's property. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. So the follow-up to that is, if somebody has their fence that has been tagged, what should they do?
So that's because we're unique in the situation of where we're at, that's a question of where you're actually live. Some of the students in our schools may live in the city of Everett. Some may live in the unincorporated area of Snohomish County, and others may live in actual Mukilteo. If that person wants to specifically reach out to me and we can figure out where they're at, and I can put them with contacts for their actual agency, but there may be 3 different answers depending on where their actual fence is.
Yeah, thank you. The next question is also for you, and it says, how bad is the Everett gang problem?
I guess that's more of a subjective question. I used to live in Southern California. I don't, because I'm now at an age where I raise children, right? I think any criminal street gang issue in a community that can terrorize can be bad. So any of it would be unacceptable. But I believe that the area and the community in which I'm raising my children is still a very safe community, right? Like, is there influence and issue in this area? Yes, but I wouldn't be able to tell you how bad it is compared to anywhere else, right? This is still where I choose to raise my children and feel that this is the community in which I want to be in.
Thank you. What is the status of the Everett Police Department's pre-pandemic program that was established to reach out to youth with mentors? What's the status on that?
It's still here. My number is still given out by all of the principals. It's still in every library in the youth. So the programs of reaching out are still there, but my approach is individualistic to each youth. There's not a set program that, hey, this is going to fix this youth, or this is going to be to fix this youth. I reach out and figure out what that youth needs to for a positive influence. Now, we, the Everett Police Department, the city of Everett, are looking for partner organizations that can actually take on the actual case management and working with families on a day-to-day basis. But the programs that the Everett Police Department asked for me to start in 2017 are still there, and my number hasn't changed.
Thank you. Some nonprofit support organizations for youth are struggling financially. One is closed. Do we have a safety net to catch students if they lose their support from these organizations? And I guess I would just answer that from the school district's perspective is, we are here obviously for students, and we want to have students involved at all ages and levels in our district. We did have to cut $24 million from our budget last year, and we anticipate cutting again this year. Not such a large number, but we will be cutting again. And we're very thoughtful about not touching opportunities for students, obviously during the school day and outside of the school day. So I just speak on, we want kids to be involved. We want them to that's it. We want students to feel like they belong and that they have a place in our schools. And so activities, clubs, whatever it could be, sports, we want to have those for our students. So as we enter another budget cutting season, again, we're very mindful about having strong supports for our students through activities and clubs. I don't know if there's anybody else, John, if you want to add to anything or.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to add real quick, in the instance where somebody finds themselves in that situation where there is services that are being reduced from a community partner somewhere out there, go ahead and feel free to reach out to me, and we can attempt to find other community partners that may be able to help fill in some of those needs. There may not be services that we offer ourselves, but we're happy to try and do the work to find solutions for people.
Thank you. Okay, this one is for you again, Sergeant Fletcher. Have you seen an increase or decrease in gang activity over the past few years?
So I'm not the numbers person, so I wouldn't be able to tell you if there's an actual increase or decrease. I can tell you that I believe there is more influence. And as we went through with the the meaning of graffiti, it is a little bit more concerning, right? that we have moved from when I got here in 09 to an influence through an issue, and appears to be what I describe as a problem, right? That it's here in the community. So do I see that there are a lot more youth that are being influenced and impacted? Yes. But would I be able to tell you if there's more gang activity than there was 5 years ago? I wouldn't be able to. I think that more of our youth are at risk for being either involved in criminal street gang activity or impacted by it. So yes, there has been an increase in that.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to call in a couple of people on this next question. I'm talking specifically John and Brett. Is there ongoing safety communication being sent out to families and staff? Like, do we get any information when a student is found to have a gun on campus, or when a student is involved in gang-related activities or violence? And I'm going to start by saying I work very closely, as do the administrators in all the buildings, work very closely with our Director of Communications, Diane Bradford. She's wonderful. And we try to be as transparent as possible. And the best thing I could answer before I ask somebody else to give their 2 cents is it really is situational. So sometimes I would say we try to be as transparent as possible. We start with the staff at the school when there is an incident or they need to know something, and then we do communications to the families that are in whose students go to that school, and then we think about whether or not we have to share information with the entire school district. So there's no one right way that we do things. Every situation is different. And again, we want to be more transparent than not. So John or Brett, what would you add to that? It kind of sounds like a non-answer, and I'm trying to be as direct as possible about it.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Brinson. Mine's not going to sound like much more clear of an answer, but really it is a case-by-case basis. We look at any time that we want to ensure that we are addressing situations with everybody that we can and being transparent. However, there are instances where there will be information for a variety of reasons, whether it's being as part of an active investigation that's going on that we cannot share. However, we always do strive in working with Diane Bradford, our Director of Communications, to ensure that on the incident side that we're sharing as much as we can for anybody who is involved or contingently involved in a situation. As far as ongoing safety communication, we hold these webinars twice a year, so we hope that everybody who attended tonight will continue to attend in the future. And then we're looking at ways that we can leverage the information that we have out there that's currently available. For example, on our Department of Safety and Security website, there's a lot of information out there currently from past webinars, past recordings, past resources that we want to get out there to everybody that we can. And so one thing that we would ask would be for any parents or members of the community, staff members that may be here tonight, being an advocate for getting information out there and getting more community and family awareness as far as what's being done on the safety and security side is something that we advocate for as well. Because as we've talked about with a lot of the different situations, the more awareness that's out there, the better. The more awareness that there are things we can do on the gang influence side to suppress or ensure we don't have a gang problem or a gang issue, the better.
Thank you. So we have 3 questions. We're gonna do our best to answer them as quickly as we can. So are Everett gangs using guns or other weapons against non-gang community? I'm looking at Sergeant Fletcher, but he doesn't know I'm looking at him.
What's that? No, I assumed that you were asking me to unmute. Again, I cannot predict the motives of, and we don't always know that there's a gang tied to every situation, right? So I can't say that gangs are going out and just victimizing non-gang members or members of the community that are not gang related. or it's just it is still a criminal offense, right? There is a victim, right? Even if the victim is gang related, right? We are still responsible for investigating that crime based on the incident and the victim. So I wouldn't have an answer to whether or not they are using against non-gang communities. It's still just a crime that we have to investigate and shouldn't have happened in the first place.
Thank you. Okay, my last question is, because I said 3 when it was time, is, and I know Brett, I think you answered one through chat. So what do you attribute the increase of gang influence to? What would you attribute the increase of gang influence to?
I think the huge increase that we've seen in the last 3 years has been with COVID happening and youth doing a lot more things on devices for a short period of time, and the lack of parents not being aware of that is where that influence is coming from. So trying to get all of that information out and know that there's been a shift and recruiting is not happening necessarily at the corner park or anything like that, how it was in the early 90s when I was there, that it's happening on that device that they're looking at 8 to 12 hours a day. That's what I attribute the large increase to.
Thank you. And I think, Brett, you were typing an answer to the last question, so thank you so much. Again, Sergeant Fletcher, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us and share your expertise and answer questions. We really appreciate it. And again, thank you, those of you that joined us today. We really appreciate your time and your interest. This is being recorded, so it'll be on our website, and Diane Bradford will, I'm sure, send it out to all staff, the link to the recording and where it's going to be on the website. So again, thank you so much for being here and have a great night, everybody. Thank you.